podcast. I'm your host, The Mole. It's the Billy Woods episode. DoNormaal will also join us. And as usual, Kool Keith is here as well. I want to talk about some new releases. We got a new album by First Degree the DE. I have loved this guy for a really long time. One of the world's most unique rappers, hailing from Sacramento, got a style all his own, and I'm very excited to be interviewing him very soon, probably for the next episode.
The kind of record you can emulate. I see it now, these important raps can't fit in the world without the DE. Holistic DE looking out. Hit me up, help you buy a house. Crazy world, who can you trust? His name's DE, and this is Bus. Crazy world, who can you trust? My name DE, and this my boss. You're welcome for my mighty nectar. We can only find a way to begin.
Precipice is the new album by Dialect. I think they're an awesome group. They came out 2 decades ago, fully formed as this beautifully orchestrated group, mixing rap with noisy, droney sort of music. And they've been really consistent since then. Each album, I feel like it builds on their sound, and I'm always excited for a new release. And Precipice does not disappoint.
Chocos and knees, thought like birds in the bees. Lit beneath the sword of Damocles. Best believe we burn thrones. Unknown pleasures got these rabid bounce phones. Full grown, inking full poems. Set to ancient rhythms and even more ancient drones. Dying tones fill air, believe that C sharp. Never seen you say that only C sharks.
Spectacular is the new album by Randall Bravery and Joshua Virtue. Coming together for this album, they created something beautiful. What I really like about Randall Bravery's production is how he goes so far off the quantized grid to the point where it feels like the beat is about to derail itself. And I think it's a testament to Joshua Virtue as an MC that he manages to so effortlessly ride these beats. Also a great lyricist. He's got a full discography that I would highly recommend if you like this project. Same goes for Randall Bravery. Check it out.
Can't compare the rest that follows when you cry yourself to sleep. The children bolt upright, but you like your ground shaking. The titans reawaken, bathed in oncoming headlights. Something never sat right. Mask ebony with breast milk white. Everyone suggesting get a gun. Passing footsteps as the AC hums. We knew that shit was coming all along. Even young, flinging round around the fucking axis of the sun. Flowing motion while you stumbling for a pun. I'll be in the parlor smoking hella blunts with Carl Young. And when you ready, you can come.
Lingua Franca has a new album, Bell Ringer. A beautiful blend of in-your-face, revolutionary lyrics and hard beats with sweet melodies, real juxtaposition of extremes, and yet another artist that I am excited to be interviewing in the coming months.
Imagine a minute, millions of avarice citizens planting the spinach and waxing the kitchens and stacking the linens, contractors and renters and tenants, the labor extracted for pittance. What if they coordinated to address the sort of state of it in an organization? Cause fucking what? That's what organized labor does. And not even sort of, it's more of the crux. Taking the power from hoarders of bucks, big bankers offshore and they cuts, returning the value of labor to those who created the billionaires owe it to us. So if you're jaded and solely about waking up early to earning bad, if you sad about burning, if you got a curious yearning and had it with passively lurking, we got your back and we happy to have you out on the picket line actively working, going. Which side are you on?
Buck 65, after a long hiatus, which he ended last year with the Billy project, has been releasing some previously unheard tracks and re-releasing some harder to find projects. Two of these that I really enjoy are the Dirt Bike Project, and the Dirty Work EP.
What else can a poor man do? Does he have besides his place? It's hard to find, he is instrumental. Painted gray, hides his face. Afraid of being someone else, don't let me vanish from your sight. I shed my skin, I had no choice, I taught myself to fight.
These are both on his Bandcamp, in addition to a bunch of other stuff, including the first single from a forthcoming project that is a collaboration between himself and Bird Prey. That's called Double Nice. And of course, Billy Woods has his new album, Aethiopes, out, but we'll get to that in our interview. Links to all the aforementioned releases can be found in the show notes, which, among other places, are at the Weird Rap Substack. That is where I also publish little articles from time to time. I recently published one on the Afros and another on BWP. You can subscribe for free and stay abreast of various weird rap goings on. You'll find that at weird.substack.com. And now it is time for my talk with a singular, great and strange artist by the name of DoNormaal.
My dad died when I was 9 months old. So I kind of just grew up with death as a topic, death being something that I would have to talk about at a young age, like if people ask me, oh, your dad, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, my dad died. And just kind of growing up with this big part of my life that was kind of mysterious, but just something that was super normal. Thinking about death, thinking about the fact that the people that you love aren't always going to be here. You're not always going to be here. And I think it was just always really important to me living in community with the people that have passed, like respecting the fact that my dad and other people in my life that have died might not be here in person, but they're very much here and they very much have a presence, and I can interact with that presence and acknowledge that presence. So I think, with my music, I definitely try to do that. I definitely try to leave space for anything that my ancestors might want to work out through me. My parents decided to settle in Long Beach after they got married in the Netherlands, which was very, very shortly after they met in the Caribbean. My dad is Trinidadian and Surinamese, but he had his adolescence and his young adulthood in the Netherlands. And my mom, she was born in Nigeria, but she's from Sierra Leone, and then moved with her parents to Switzerland and then moved to the States to finish her schooling. Both my mom and my dad, they both have two parents that are from different countries. So I'm pretty American, but I have these kinds of influences. I grew up like bouncing around these really kind of like suburban, kind of hicky areas of Southern California. It's in such contrast to where my parents come from, which makes me, I feel like, kind of just a pigeon type of person.
Do you think that having all those different cultures as part of your background is reflected in your music at all, as far as like fusing different elements of different genres together?
I think totally. like my dad was very into like soca and calypso music, and like got my mom into that and Afrobeat stuff. Then like, my grandma, who is born and raised in the States, she's like, Motown, soul type of stuff, Gladys Knight. So yeah, I feel like there's a lot of influence there. And a lot of people say that I have like a little bit of a Caribbean accent in some of my music. That's really weird to me because it's not anything that I'm like purposefully trying to do, but it just kind of comes out. It comes out when I like get in that zone of like swagging out, which is what I think is totally a little bit of what I was talking about before with like ancestors wanting to get in there.
So now I let it go. I turn that bitch up, blow a kiss, just do my setting go. Say DoNormaal, she got the split, so I'm professional. There's something nipping in my belly, wanna get to know. You wanna get to know.
I've always been really, really into hip hop since I was little, hip hop and rap. And around that time, when I was around that age, like 13 to, 15, 16, there was a lot of just like Southern trap music that was starting to happen, like you had like Gucci and you had Soulja Boy and you had like them Franchise Boys.
That's funny. I was going to ask you if Soulja Boy might have been an influence on you, because that's like one thing I kind of hear in the melodic parts of some of your vocals.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Like I love Soulja Boy. And I definitely feel like I took a lot of influence from like, just like Southern trap music and like the playfulness and the melody. So there was that, but then there was also like, I was going to school with like all of these white kids from San Francisco at my boarding school. And they got me really into like the indie rock bands that were big at the time, like the Postal Service and the Shins and the Strokes and like Band of Horses. So, I was listening to a lot of that music too, which also I feel like informed me melodically. Like the Shins is a band that I just still love to this day and listen to all the time because I just think the songwriting is so poetic and the melodies are so on point. Kanye West was huge for me. Like his writing really influenced me just because it was confessional, which is, a lot of rap, but you didn't hear a lot of rappers being that kind of like vulnerable and that willing to kind of talk about their insecurities and the things that made them kind of weird and stand out. So that for me was a really important moment.
Going back to like your very mixed background, can you talk about how the title of your 2017 album, Third Daughter, relates to your sort of lack of a single geographic identity?
Yeah, I definitely feel like because I've never really had like a hometown or like a community of people that I have been around for a long time, or just all those things that like people use to kind of represent themselves and that they like to rep. I've just never had that because of how much I've moved around and how hard it's been to like keep in contact and things like that. So my family has really been what I return to when it comes to contextualizing myself and my life. So yeah, Third Daughter is just kind of like acknowledging that and acknowledging that if I were to really have to contextualize myself, it would be within my family and, amongst all my siblings, my mom, my grandparents, and because they're the people that really raised me and influenced me the most.
How I choose to eat and twice the serving size I do. Wait, I have a mama that's from Africa. My daddy was a Trini, Suriname, and a Dutch man too. Go rooster, I'll be going home. I'm through. Give me a booster, give me another reason why I'm through. Hi.
As we move through life and have all these experiences, hopefully we're gaining knowledge and insights and stuff. But I think in general, we would tend to also lose something through that, like a certain like carefree nature, and we become hardened in some ways, jaded or whatever. And you mentioned before how you try to recapture that childlike spirit in your music, which I think I hear in there. But for the listener, I wonder if you can kind of expand on that idea and talk about how it informs your writing and your vocal delivery and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I always want to be super original. Like that's really important to me, is to really like honor the unique aspects of myself. And so I think that when I can kind of like bring out my inner child, it really helps me to like stay true to myself, because that inner child was, those were the first creative ideas I've ever had, the first styles, vibes that, were just coming out of me being a goofy little kid, running around, playing with my sisters, making up little songs and ditties. That feels like very original me, because it wasn't so influenced by everything else that came after. And so I think that when I feel like I'm doing my best kind of writing, and when I'm in the zone the most, it's very, very reminiscent of just my childhood and like the things that I was thinking about and liking and how I was expressing back then. And I think that's why there's just this kind of lighthearted, playful, youthful vibe in a lot of my music.
Yeah, I would imagine that frame of mind could be really helpful for artists in general to get to a freer place. But I wonder if you're able to put into words like how you actually go about accessing that kind of a mind state.
Mm-hmm.
Might be something you're not really able to put into words, but like for a lot of people, I bet it's impossible to even get there, to go back to feeling that spirit at all.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because it's like I almost want to relate it to like mental health and like mental illness in a way, but like not in a bad way. But it's like when you think of words like dissociation or those types of coping mechanisms that come from trauma. It's like where is the root of all of those coping mechanisms? It's always back in childhood, and it's like a lot of people, I think, when they are dissociating, zoned out, or like feeling very emotional, maybe they're getting triggered by something. I feel like those are the moments people very easily go back to their child self. And you very much see people actually acting in that way of like, this is their childhood self, but unfortunately it's mostly like the wounded childhood self.
Yeah.
But it's really the same thing. And I think for me, when I was a kid, and if I would get really, really sad, I would talk to myself and I would like hype myself up. And I can totally like hear that little voice of mine. And I feel like getting into that place where I can access that little voice, that kind of that strong childhood self, that pops up when you feel like you really need it. And maybe that's because you just want to hang out and write a song, or, you had a long day at work and you're just going to like, do whatever your vices are or whatever. That's the zone for me, it's like just letting yourself let go of all of like that adult stuff that is always, like swirling around in our heads, the moments when we really want to like let ourselves zone out and relax. And that's how that strong kind of like active, creative child comes out of me personally.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting to think about that in the context of trauma. And like, they say that trauma can in some ways stunt people's development. And then that made me think about how you brought up Kanye West. I think he might be an example of, he definitely seems like a child a lot of the time, and like who makes, amazing work from that place, having the courage of a child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about. So, yeah, your lyrics seem really personal, dealing with like emotional struggles, relationships, personal development. Of course, death is a theme. And in a big way, the spirit of weird rap is about the misfit, the outsider. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how that sort of part of your identity factors into your work.
Yeah. It's so funny because I feel like I'm so inherently weird that I was really shocked when people started calling my music weird. I really didn't think of it as weird at all. I really thought I was just like rapping and doing my thing. And it was almost like uncomfortable to present it to people and for them to be like, oh, like this is experimental. This is alternative. This is weird. I just didn't think of it that way because I think weird is very much the norm for me. It's not something I think about too much, like I think a lot about making new sounds, like making something that I feel like people haven't heard a lot. I don't think too much about like being weird or being a weirdo, even though I know that I am. And I know that like a lot of people experience me that way. And I think that's just because I have a very, very strong inner world that I pretty much stick to. And then I have like, a very few select close people in my life outside of my family that are also very, very weird. And so to me, it's kind of like, it's still almost shocking. It's like being raised by a pack of wolves and then like somebody takes a photo of you one day and you realize that you're a human, and you're like, what? That's how I feel sometimes about being a weirdo. But there's not a lot about my experience that I can easily relate to a lot of people on, like there's little bits and pieces, but not really fully. So like the outsider, the misfit, it's always been that way, and I've been trying to my whole life decide, am I real? Like, are you going to be okay with that? Or are you going to kind of be okay with that, but also like not do the full step towards self-acceptance of that? Because I think, I express myself really colorfully. Like I make art, I make music, like everything from what I do creatively, how I dress, how I speak to people, my interests are like pretty non-typical. But there's still a part of me that is like, yeah, I have the blinders onto it. Like I don't really look at it that way. It's like I don't want to look at it that way. For example, like I just moved to, not just moved, but like a year and a half ago when I moved to LA, I moved to this place, which is a communal artist community. And everybody here is like super cool and like super outgoing. And I was really like, I wanna do this. I want to be that person, I want to be that person that's socializing and is really getting in the mix and that spends all my time outside, having a grand old time telling jokes. And then I realized that it's like, I don't think that's me. Like, I think I'm a little weird and I don't really the average type of socializing is difficult for me, and I don't really know where I fit in with certain topics, like especially topics that aren't like deeply philosophical or like, so um I'm actually going to be leaving this place soon, and I feel like that decision was a big decision for me to make, of being like, okay, are you gonna always turn a blind eye to what you know is true about yourself, so that you can kind of like feel better and more accepted, or are you gonna sacrifice that and do things and go places that you feel like truly nurture you? And I think that is probably like the biggest test for every outsider and every misfit is like, are you going to let yourself be that way and be okay with it and not be ashamed of it and not try to constantly go the other route and fight yourself? Or are you going to constantly be looking for reflections of yourself in a world where you're not going to find them?
Yeah, I think a lot of us weirdos have gone back and forth between trying to be normal and then just embracing it. And I love the idea that, the true weirdo doesn't have to try to be unique. It's just they naturally are.
Yeah.
And that's great when it comes to art, for sure.
Cutting down the ones who made this shit, goddamn, I fucking hate the base. I'm coming with a gift and a promise. We're cutting down you bitches with the badge, dog gunning. While she was sleeping in her bed in her bonnet, all with their lover undercover like the cops that just broke in. I'm coming with some gifts and a promise. They're gonna wish they had some sense in fucking coming. Cause I'm someone with a gift and a promise.
Well, Disney produced my whole next album that I'm working on mixing and mastering right now, which is really weird. I think like the beats are super, super strange monstrosities that I really had to work hard to tackle and figure out how to ride in the best way, which is just usually not my thing. Usually it's like, if I can't figure out how to approach a beat in the first 10 seconds, I'm not going to use that beat. But with this album, I really, there was something about the beats where I was like, this would be kind of cool if I could pull it off. So I worked really hard to like tackle these and make songs over them. And so it's a totally different approach than what I have usually done.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to hear that. It's been like 5 years since the last album you put out, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, besides the beat selection, how has your writing and or vocal delivery changed since then?
I think that it's still pretty like recognizable DoNormaal as far as my delivery and as far as like the majority of the lyrical content, but also a lot of it is about where I found myself after ending my relationship of 8 years, which was also just a big part of my musical journey, and kind of like finding myself back in California, away from the entire adult life that I had created in Seattle in the middle of the pandemic. I feel like a lot of the content in my other albums is kind of like this general, like philosophical life stuff. And there are moments of this album that are a little bit more specific.
Cool. Well, yeah, I was worried that you were going to go from dreary Seattle to sunny California and that your music would get all happy and sunny. But I'm glad to hear that it's going to be extra weird.
Yeah,
that's what we want to hear, weird rap.
Yeah.
So yeah, anything else you want to include in this interview?
No, I think I just wanted to say that I think magic is really important, and I think it's happening all the time.
How would you define magic?
I think it's hard because I identify it in all of these around me and in all of these different contexts and all of these different ways. But it's like what happens when energy is moving freely, and like without any conscious interference, the way that things connect and work out and meet each other and cycle in this infinite way that just works, like even when it doesn't feel like it's working, even in this time in the world where there's so many things that are just tragedies and sadness and there's so much injustice. We're fighting the injustice. Growth is happening. Evolution is happening. And I just think the way that the world works in general is pretty magic, the way that you can't go wrong here. Our experience just leads to growth and progress and evolution, no matter what, and I think that's magic.
Check out the Patreon bonus for another 20-some minutes with DoNormaal. We get more into her creative process, the difficult and formative experiences she had in boarding school. We talk about Seattle's underground hip-hop scene, and she shares an exclusive track from her upcoming album. She was not lying when she said that it's super weird. It is very strange and awesome. I think it's probably my favorite thing that I've heard from her. And that's in addition to some extra time with Billy Woods. You'll find the bonus episode at patreon.com/weirdrap. And now, once again, Kool Keith, our resident fortune teller, is back.
Yeah. It's the weird rap horoscopes of Kool Keith. Check your horoscope. Aries, bring a dog to work. Taurus, adopt a tree. Geminis, adopt a cockroach. Cancers, sing the national anthem 1,000 times. Leos, hold your breath for 1 hour. Virgos, have coitus with a blue whale. Libras, cut your hair and give it to a friend. Scorpios, put a penny in your nostril. Sagittarius, lick the wall. Capricorns, wear your undies on the outside. Aquarius, file for bankruptcy. Pisces, climb Mount Everest.
Speaking of Kool Keith, we have a new line of Dr. Octagon t-shirts, a beautiful full-color design that is available at weirdrap.com. We've also got an older Kool Keith t-shirt design there and a bunch of other stuff like links to the Weird Rap, Bandcamp, YouTube, SoundCloud, Reddit, and all the social medias. That's weirdrap.com. Now, I apologize for the sound quality in this next segment, but in any case, I think it's a great talk with possibly the greatest rapper of all time, Billy Woods. You ready to get into some hack psychoanalysis and not so gentle prodding into the depths of your soul?
We'll see.
All right. Because of the fact that you hide your face, some of the themes I've noticed in your various projects, especially hiding places, themes like secrecy, deception, repression, compartmentalization, because of the sort of cryptic, complex quality of your lyrics, I feel like obscuration and hidden meanings are an integral part of you. And well, first of all, do you agree with that assessment, or what do you think about that?
Sure, you is a big word, but certainly music. Maybe, yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, there's the person and there's the artistic output, of course. As a listener, it's hard for me to separate the two, but maybe we'll get into that a little bit. And of course, it's kind of antithetical to those characteristics, but I want to try to unveil some of these mysteries, I guess, and try to explore the reasons for what seems like a guardedness in your work. So hopefully I'm not being too invasive or prying too much.
That's interesting because honestly, I think if you asked me, I would say that that's not actually the case. I don't think the work is that guarded. Who's a rapper who you think's work is unguarded?
Well,
who do you know more about, for example? Me or Rock Marciano?
Right. I guess a lot of artists keep a veil of mystery around them, and especially the ones that don't post a lot on their social media.
Not even saying he's keeping a veil of mystery, but I'm a fan of his work. I've listened to him since probably the first song I heard from him was The Heist with Raekwon and Ghost and whatever. I really couldn't tell you anything about his family situation. Certainly the things that I know about him as a person stem primarily from either personal interaction or somebody I know who interacted with him or an interview or something.
Yeah, and
so
I do
it's just
feel
interesting because on the one hand, I don't think you're wrong in what you're saying, but I don't, it's interesting to me how the fact of like, okay, my faith and name are not public knowledge, but that makes me a more obscure figure than, there's people who have been rapping for 20 years and you couldn't tell me one thing about their lives or emotional state with any sort of real certainty.
Yeah, but there are...
How much do I know about Black Thought?
I think what it is, besides the obvious fact that you're not on social media tweeting your every thought like some artists are, it's the lyrics themselves in the songs that constantly confound me. And, like a Black Thought, I can get what he's trying to get across pretty quickly. A Rock Marciano as well. But it's really maybe what I'm projecting onto you is from my frustration sometimes with your lyrics. Like, I'm a huge fan, obviously, but I want to know, like, why do you have to make it so difficult? Like, your lyrics seem to require a deep literary and historical knowledge, some more like obscure knowledge of like the Chicago Bears and various other things,
Require or would deepen your understanding?
Would deepen the understanding, of course.
And this is a genuine question. I'm not trying to argue with you. But tell me a song where you wouldn't be able to really appreciate it or get anything from it. And I mean, I may be wrong, but one of the things I try not to do is make music that you would, like, I don't know. You can tell me a song or I can bring one. I can pick one at random. It's
any song, really. It's all about...
Let's take Asylum, for example.
I think Mengistu Haile Miriam is my neighbor. Whoever it is moved in and put an automated gate up, repainted brick walls atop which now cameras rotated. By 8 the place dark, one light burned later, razor wire like a slinky. Rumor is Paul Sabam took the secretary right eye and pinky. Evenings he take a snifter of whiskey on the veranda, I wonder what he's thinking. In the morning the maid brings coffee from the kitchen. Some nice strange music plays, I lay in bed and listen.
If you don't know anything about Haile Miriam Mengistu, Zimbabwe, African politics, the first verse is about a child who has a mysterious neighbor move in that they're spying on. And in the background of that is the family strife, which they seek to avoid, and the relative wealth that you can assume that they're living in.
Maybe I misrepresented what I'm trying to say, because I definitely do get a lot from your music. I get a lot of meaning from it, and I think anyone...
No, and I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying that I think sometimes, and I could be wrong, so I'm asking a genuine question because I try not to make music where it's like, oh, if you didn't know this particular thing about, whatever subject, weed or African post-colonial history or Shakespeare, you're not going to get anything out of listening to this. And so sometimes I'm curious because I think that I definitely make music where the more that you might know, the more you could gain, the deeper your understanding of the material would be, the more layers that would be available to you.
Yeah.
I was just giving that as an example in the sense of you could listen to Asylum and be like, if you had a family or if you were ever a kid or fascinated by the lives of a neighbor or even can imagine such a thing, then you would be able to understand the song on its most immediate level.
I think a lot of people don't listen the same way I do, but I think the fact that such deep meaning is apparent in your lyrics that I know I don't fully understand, it makes me want to get more into it and understand it all. Like that's
which is good, and I welcome that. I just would never want it to seem. It always is interesting to me when people are like, "Oh, well, you couldn't get anything from this unless you took like an advanced course on, African history or the
various
flora and fauna of the Caribbean or greatest 20th century writers."
So yeah, certainly, even if you didn't speak English, you can get a lot out of it. And whatever level of knowledge you have, you're going to get stuff out of your music. But I wonder, do you hope that certain listeners are going to get everything? Because you put so much thought and meaning into each song, apparently.
Of course, yeah, that would be great.
You'd like that. But can you really expect it? Like, I mean, I'm sure there's a small handful of people that...
You cannot expect it. And not only that, but even a cursory look at Rap Genius makes it clear that a lot of people don't even have the basic critical thinking just to see things that are pretty obvious. There's a lot of complicated stuff in my music, and there's layers that somebody might only get, or inside jokes or puns or references that there might be something which might entertain me, and so I'd put it in there. But that would be an extra level that you wouldn't have to get into to understand it. But sometimes I see people have trouble putting the basics of things together in terms of like critical analysis. Of course, I would never expect somebody to come away with everything. And then there's even sometimes a fourth level where if you knew me personally or had certain interactions, you might have an extra laugh. Like on A Day and a Week and a Year, maybe. Paradise and a Gold Watch, I was right, the price is a lot.
Paradise and a gold watch, I was right, the price was a lot.
I think can just work on its own without any need for any sort of references to anything. But it's also a callback. If you had heard this song I did with Makami called 383 Myrtle, it would have an additional amount of meaning that might amuse you.
Rest assured, it's curtains at the end. Don't talk about love that shit expensive. You don't know what it costs just to keep the friendship.
And then there's another person who was there when I wrote that song and to whom in many ways that song concerned, and the owner of said gold watch, who would have an additional level of understanding and perhaps amusement about it. So those are the three levels on which like that line works. I think you could just listen to it and be like, oh, that's a compelling image on some level, and furthers the meaning of what I'm talking about. And then if you had heard 383 Myrtle, that would inform the idea of the whole song, which is the cost of love and things in general. And if you listen to a lot of my music, then you know that that's a recurring theme in and of itself. And then there's an additional level, which is if you are the person who owns said gold watch, you would have an additional level of understanding of it. But I never want it to be like I'm just sitting here writing indecipherable riddles.
Yeah, to be a little bit critical, I think it does come across as a riddle a lot of the time. Like all the parts I'm not getting make it hard to focus on the parts that I am getting, or it feels like static and I'm like unsure of what I'm supposed to think of it because there's all these parts that I know I'm not understanding. And I'm trying to form like a full picture and I'm not getting it. So I wonder, have you ever considered trying to dumb it down or streamline it, or would that be just super boring for you?
Sometimes I feel like I have songs that are pretty straightforward. I mean, at least they seem straightforward to me.
Yeah. There are some that are more straightforward.
A song like RPMs on Today I Wrote Nothing. A person sitting in the back of a police car looking out of a window.
Yeah.
It goes from point A to point B. The dreams come true. I'd like to think it's the world's shortest love song.
All right, so you're right.
An
Yeah.
old picture. Hit her up like I still miss you. 2 words, nigga, please, fair enough.
Caught feelings off an old picture. Hit her up like I still miss you. 2 words, nigga, please, fair enough.
Would you please make my dreams come true?
But sometimes I make something very straightforward, and then people find some convoluted other meanings in it.
Yeah, do you find it frustrating to be misunderstood in that way?
Well, I mean, it depends on what level and how embarrassing the misunderstanding of the lyrics are. But I think that I definitely don't set out to write things and say, how can I make this pure?
And I guess now that I think about it, part of it is you're approaching many different subjects in many different ways, as opposed to someone like a Pusha T. We know, we can half listen and we already know what every song and every line is about. So we can just dive in sporadically and get what we want out of it. But
the not knowing what exactly to expect, because it's like you could be delivered a straightforward song and then people want to think, well, it can't be a straightforward song. But yeah, I do try to move around expectations and I do try to challenge myself. Like when you said, do you try to do something straight? I try to do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
I do think that my music can be difficult, coded, complex, and layered, and I think those are good things. But I also think sometimes it's very straightforward. Sometimes it's places in between.
Do you think that unraveling and spelling out the meaning for certain songs would ruin them to some degree? Or would you consider releasing lyrics with footnotes that really fully explain all of your work if you had the time?
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of work. Not totally out of the question, but does anyone really want to read poetry with a bunch of footnotes of what the poem's about?
I would, but I'm not most people.
I don't know. Certainly, I wouldn't be totally against that, but I haven't thought about doing that, and I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't write the book and then do the critical analysis of your own book, although I'm more than capable of doing that. That seems like a job for critics.
Yeah. Or like a college professors.
Yeah, that's a type of, that's my mother. That's a type of criticism. Somebody sent me a link to some guy who did do that with this album, something else was interesting. And of course, at times I thought, whoa, you're making a really crazy leap, but that's what that craft is about. And I know this guy recently wrote a book. His name is Joseph Kozlarek, I think. Recently wrote a book, kind of critical analysis of a bunch of my work, and I'd done an interview with him some time ago, aiding him in doing that. I mean, I grew up around that sort of criticism, and I think it's valuable. I have no problem participating, but at this particular moment in my life, I'm trying to be an artist. You know, if some critic wanted me to sit down with them and discuss themes and ideas and help them footnote my work, and perhaps it'd be interesting. You know, I'm busy trying to continue to make meaningful work, and then even when I'm dead, people can write their footnotes, incorrect or not. if I manage to be somebody important enough.
Yeah, well, I think they will if humanity doesn't implode before the time comes. So I guess I'm gathering that you're not as secretive and guarded as I was projecting onto you. But
Well, that may not be true. I'm not even saying that. It's fine if you have questions in that area. Just sometimes I think with the work, it's a little overstated.
yes.
And I think some of it is also people's expectations from this particular genre of music and perhaps from music, period.
Certainly.
Also, people have a preconceived idea. And so it's like every song must be about colonialism. And it's like, this is a song about how my relationship fell apart, not Exxon Mobil and Niger River Delta, but okay.
On the subject, though, of trying not to project onto you and just trying to uncover who you really are, I wonder if we can go back to your childhood and formative experiences. I know, and I'm sure a lot of listeners know, that you spent most of your early childhood days in Zimbabwe, and your dad died at 7. Is that right? 7 years old?
No. I was 11.
11.
I didn't even go. I was born in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother is from the Caribbean. My father was from Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. And I went there when I was about to turn 6.
Okay. How old were you when you left Zimbabwe?
Right before I turned 13.
Right. I guess the question is, you lost a parent at a young age, like I did myself when I was 10. And that tends to fuck a person up, change them indefinitely, I think. And I wonder if you...
Sure. Formative experience, to be sure.
Yeah. So I wonder if you can talk about how you think that has affected you. If you can put it into words. I know it's probably a huge question.
I mean, that's a lot. Innumerable. You're talking about psychologically or changing the material aspects of my life? Psychologically.
Psychologically is the end, I guess.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that it was definitely a formative experience, and in terms of seeing somebody you know well and love very much actually dead in a casket is eye-opening, because especially at that age, although of course you know that people die and so on and so forth, you haven't necessarily absorbed the actual finality that's involved.
There's a noise in my head. Last thing my father said on the side of a road, then he was dead. Saw my first body at 7. My friend, they said he went to heaven, but I remember his bike twisted, wheels still stuck in that truck hood. So yeah, I don't sleep that good. Get up and roll the wood, feed the cancer in my chest. Tumors kill half my family, AIDS gon' take the rest. Fuck, I need a vest. Diabetes kill more niggas than bullets. Gotta get, please pull it.
And yeah, I would say at that point, it really helped me to understand that life can be snatched away at any moment in time. This is an idea I found both terrifying and motivational.
Motivational how?
I mean, you got to live now.
Yeah.
If you have people around you that you care about, you should tell them about it now. If you have something you want to do, you should try and do it now. The assumption that there's going to be a tomorrow or another juncture at which you can do things is an illusion. I mean, there might be and there may not be. And the fact that I think before then, you generally think that, there's going to be some sort of fanfare involved, or, hey, so-and-so's dying, everyone gather around, and it could really be as simple as you say goodbye to a person over your shoulder as you walk away, and that's the last time that you ever see them.
So you're forced to deal with the concept of loss at an early age.
Yeah. Death is the inevitability, the unpredictability, and the finality of death. Because when you look at the person, you can see that they're gone. They're gone.
Yeah.
There's something about when you look at a dead person, it doesn't look like the same person is just asleep. Not even trying to get into any sort of religious debate. There is something gone. There's something missing.
And of course, in that case, it's not just someone, it's a part of yourself, an integral part of, I would imagine, your identity. If you're close to your dad at 11, it's not just death you're becoming acquainted with, it's losing a huge part of yourself. And then at 13, leaving to a different country, that's another experience of loss, right? That's a huge kind of shift in your whole world, right?
Yes, although we came back to the States almost pretty much every year, and sometimes to Jamaica and for the holidays. So it was very different to actually move back here and live here again, especially as a teenager.
But I wonder, did that give you an easier time letting things go after that, or a greater fear of loss, or both?
A good question. I don't know if I would say. I don't know if I would say easier time letting go of what?
Of things in general, I would say, to bring it to myself a bit, I feel like I have an easier time with death, I think, because I dealt with it at a young age.
Than some of my peers? Sure, yeah. I think that could go either way, depending on what type of person you are. But for me, yes, because at that point, the illusion of some sort of safety for you or your loved ones is stripped away. So either it becomes a crippling fear or something that you say, I've been through this before.
Yeah.
I mean, much like the first time that you're really in love with somebody and you break up or something happens and you're gone, there's a certain level on which you might think, oh, well, that's it. I'll never experience that again in my life. And you learn the happy and sad truth that life goes on, which is its own mixed, its own mixed bag. Yeah. Sometimes that is scary in and of itself because, yeah, things do go on, Maybe a day comes when you can't really remember the person's face so much as you can remember pictures of the person.
Yeah.
But yes, the realization that life goes on, which is both encouraging and at times terrifying.
I feel like sometimes I'm hesitant to completely commit to any sort of relationships because I have no faith that they will last. And
nothing's going to last.
But a lot of people seem to have that dream that, marriage is forever, and that sort of spirit drives a lot of...
It could be. That's the other thing, too. The opposite is not untrue.
Yeah.
People are married forever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to also fear doing things because they might not last forever is, again, to just fall on the other side of the logical fallacy, right?
Yeah.
Nothing's going to last forever.
So do you think it fucked you up, or do you feel like you dealt with it pretty well?
Does it have to be one or the other?
No, I guess not.
I would not undo what had happened, because who knows what those are now integral building blocks of becoming the person that I am. So
sure.
I would not undo
them. You told me before you identify as Zimbabwean American and Jamaican American. Another big question, but how would you say that these identities interrelate and guide you?
I guess what I would say is that all of these experiences inform the fact that life, reality, culture, the meaning of identity are malleable things and not as fixed as people, I think, sometimes imagine. Like what it means to be Black, for example, is different in all three of those places. Argue what constitutes whiteness is different in all three of those places. The way people perceive national identity or perceive the other places that I was from was different in all of those places. In Zimbabwe at the time, type of people that I grew up around, and the politics of my family and the country at the time were staunchly anti-imperialist and thus also anti-American in many ways.
Yeah.
People perceived me as being more American than anything else, which is not to say people treated me poorly or anything. It's just that I had an American accent. I thought of myself as American. In the United States, people didn't know anything about Zimbabwe, and people's perceptions of Africa were interesting, although not uniform. They were interesting across the board. And people's perceptions of me as a foreigner with a funny accent were also interesting, since I just come from somewhere where people perceive me to be a foreigner with a funny accent.
Yeah.
Was instructive and enlightening. I think Jamaica a whole separate set of expectations and thoughts, Also, people in Jamaica never really were very interested in my African experience. And if they were, they tended to be Rastas who already had a preconceived idea of Africa that, while very positive, didn't necessarily line up with my experience and or the politics and understandings that I had grown up with in Africa.
Yeah. Did you have much experience with Rastafarianism?
Some small extent. I didn't grow up in a religious family, and the religious, spiritual beliefs were always a bit of a stretch for me. And certainly I did not grow up in a family with any sort of the politics of my father and where I grew up didn't really have a lot of reverence for the idea of monarchy. So put those two things together, and the idea that I would believe Haile Selassie was the resurrection of Jesus Christ and the new Messiah is pretty low.
Would you label yourself an atheist, or are you willing to label your faith?
I don't. I don't have any sort of real religious faith. I don't. Anything's possible, but I don't have any evidence that would really suggest to me the presence of Christian God or any other gods in these.
Yeah.
But of course, I also recognize that there could easily be what I and others don't know about the universe. Life and death is beyond my capability to. I can go rationally off of what I see around me, but it would be, I think, a little bit presumptuous to think that I have some wider understanding of the nature of all of this. Beyond that which I do have an understanding of, which is temporal existence here on Earth.
Yeah.
I can voice an opinion on what I think happens when you die, but it's literally based on nothing. I mean, it's based on what I know, but it's like, what's my cat's opinion of the entire world? He doesn't know. He doesn't know a damn thing. He lives in this house. He's maybe been outside a couple times. He doesn't know anything. I'm sure he has an opinion. And it's impossible for me to contemplate time and space. It's like, I mean, I can contemplate it, but to draw any sort of real conclusions is, for me anyway, I don't fancy myself as being that smart.
Well, do you guess it's just lights out when we die? If you had to guess?
Well, of course it's lights out, but what does that even, when I'm dead, I don't think that I'm going to be hovering above this place, watching people go about their business, although, that would be interesting. But yes, saying that I know, that's just what happens to me. That has nothing to do with, even just saying that in some way will explain the meaning of life or the meaning of all of this universe and existence and matter and space is preposterous. I mean,
of course.
Because it's lights out for me, what does that have to do with how all of this came to be? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, which are even grander than I can probably grasp or imagine, not even like an ant.
Yeah, that's a good point. To get more back to earthly matters, you mentioned growing up in a politically aware household. I've gathered it was also pretty literary. And I previously asked you for a definitive list of literary and political influences, and you said that was too big of a question to properly answer, but you mentioned bell hooks, Edward Said, Walter Rodney, Deleuze and Guattari, Alexis de Tocqueville, James Baldwin, Frantz Fanon, Mike Davis, Musifiki Mwanasali, Stephen King, Mark Twain, Roald Dahl, Flannery O'Connor, Dambudzo Marachera, Doris Lessing, Cormac McCarthy, Marlon James, and Mariana Enriquez. So, obviously, we're not going to talk about all that. I wanted you to pick one of each of these areas to discuss an author and why they were important to you or what mark they left on you. And the three areas were creative writing, political theory, and philosophy. And I guess this could take forever, but I don't know if you want to talk about at least one.
Creative writing. I mean,
yeah, let's go with creative.
There's a lot of people. I would say Roald Dahl in some ways, because when I was a kid, his books were so like, I like Judy Blume and stuff like that, but Roald Dahl's books were like transgressive and mean sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, there's a book called The Twits, and it had these horrible drawings of people in it. And I remember that.
It's definitely a dark side.
Yeah, but also very like James and the Giant Peach is very touching.
Yeah.
I would say Stephen King from a very young age I liked because you could really power through his work. It was easy to read. It was compelling. He had a real knack for dialogue and a sense of place at his height. And, at that age, reading voraciously, the amount of material that he was churning out was really great.
Yeah.
James Baldwin, just because the way that he wrote, his actual prose and style, flair were beyond other people. It's like when I was a kid and saw Jordan playing basketball, and you're like, oh, wow. Like, other people scored that same 2 points, but they didn't make it look like that. Beautiful command of language.
What Baldwin book would you recommend?
We're talking about his fiction, I assume.
Yeah. I never read James Baldwin. Like, what's a good example of his creative flair?
Well, because he has nonfiction that's also very good. But as far as his fiction, I really like Tell Me How Long the Train's Been Gone. Tell It on the Mountain's really good. People like Giovanni Room, and it is good. It just wouldn't be my first choice. Also, the ability to, although he's discussing political things, and his characters never become caricatures. He wrote an essay everybody's protest novel. It was perhaps in some ways uncharitable in its descriptions of Richard Wright, but it was influential on me in terms of in my music. I don't try to make characters to make a political point. My best work, I feel like, reveals something about human beings and life. Also, the political point of the day may later not be relevant or important, or your perception of it may now be questionable. The things that have to do with life and love and hate and the things that we go through are always going to be relevant. But Shakespeare is relevant, always.
Yeah.
So I think, somebody I read whose work really, I just thought, A, it was beautiful, and B, really always managed to grapple with being a human being as much as it did with questions of race and inequality and power.
Great.
People aren't in the book just to exemplify a particular point.
All right, I'll have to check out some Baldwin.
And then I guess lastly, Flannery O'Connor, the ability to do a lot in a limited amount of words, because a lot of my favorite work of hers is, or short stories, her best work. Although, Wise Blood is a novel, and I didn't read that till later in my life, and it's incredible. Another person great at setting place. And yeah, like I said, doing a lot in a short amount of words, having an impact, dealing with ambiguity, subverting the expectations of the reader in a story like Good Country People. Cormac McCarthy, a writer I read later in life, the bleakness of his prose, the willingness to leave conventions behind like quotation marks, the ability to set place is really strong there. And although he is on a different level where very few of his characters really seem like real people, but able to nonetheless have them fully inhabit their roles and not, weird to say this because they're not, rarely do I read a book of his and feel like, oh, well, this seems like a totally real person. There are exceptions. That's not true. There are exceptions. But an ability to avoid caricature nonetheless.
Well, I guess you could write a whole book about how different authors have impacted you.
Sure. Doris Lessing, my mother gave me her short story, Sunrise on the Veldt, because she was teaching it in her class in Zimbabwe and told me to read it. And then talked to me about it when she came home from work that day. And that was a powerful one for me. In seeing how much you could do in a short space and having somebody write about, reading a book about the place where I actually live. Because so many of the things I read were not set in Africa or Zimbabwe. So to read something that was set there, and to see somebody describe your surroundings, although they were still different from my particular surroundings I was familiar with.
Great. Thank you. And I wanted to get into your own non-musical writing, if you'd be willing. I read your essay under your pen name, Madzewanyika. And then I saw that you have supposedly a forthcoming book under that name called Let the Dead Bury the Dead. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's a memoir, I guess.
Memoir of what, childhood?
Childhood for sure. I guess it depends how far our childhood extends in your mind.
Can you talk about the origin of that pen name, Madzewanyika?
What makes you think it's a pen name?
Well, I don't know. Is that your real name?
That would be the question, right?
Should I edit this out?
No, I mean, that's the name on the book.
All right. And you got another book I saw, possibly as Billy Woods, called A is for Anarchist, co-authored by M. Musgrove.
Yeah.
What's with that one?
It's a children's book.
Oh, great.
It's an alphabet book for kids, but also a book that hopefully adults could find entertaining.
So he had to die. Let off in the club, mad loud. Don't everybody go get sad now. Used to listening back the fuck up before they clap Max, chalk up, Poogie rap to us, Frederick Douglass with the Dutch. Criminal minded, dead man pose. 9 milli go hard in the beat to super hoe. Lean out the car, one eye closed, and wash Negroes off the block like a fire hose. Same rhyme, next shine and glow. We should've known since 14 of the dome. 9-9 since D-Nice had beef in the homes. Since Noriega taping her, raping her, since they caught Lamar out on his own. Since Shine wasn't trying to go out like Wolf Jones. You're nobody tell, wish a nigga will. Hell's wind whip through killer hills. Tall tales, ex-dealers, deal all hail. Entourage exchanging rounds and you gentrify.
That's a whole interview in and of itself. Be wary of moral certitude. I think that there are always multiple sides to anything that you could think about. I think that life is fleeting and beautiful and terrible all at the same time. Be wary of both groupthink and the desire to position oneself as outside, that there's some virtue in being outside of what the group thinks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bigger question.
Well, those are some great
acting purely on emotions are both wonderful things and extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
Be careful about assigning all forms of virtue to you and those in your group while assigning all negatives to anyone who opposes you. I mean, a lot of times I'm just surprised by how certain people are of their own assertions about a complicated topic, and that I believe that history is always a valuable resource. The amount of times I see people repeating arguments that were proven wrong 50, 70, or 100 years ago and presenting them as new ones is always interesting. Art is important. Beauty, happiness, ability to not take oneself too seriously, but take yourself at least somewhat seriously. So yeah, it's a deeper subject than we have time for right now, I think.
No, I hear you. Yeah, but I think that's a great point to look at things from multiple angles and not to be too certain about anything.
But at the same time, don't be one of those people who's like, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Some people don't stand on anything, and their whole point is just instead to always point out what they see as flaws in something else. But if you ask them, okay, well, I don't know.
Yeah, you can't just be the devil's advocate and poke holes in anything. And
very boring.
Yeah.
Type of person and way of thought that is extremely prevalent, and people think, I'm an independent thinker.
For sure.
And then, yes, just be wary of having a viewpoint which then becomes a lens through which people view any and everything. So, for example, where you stand on some sort of international development becomes not about some sort of set of beliefs or values or thoughts, but instead on the fact that, America is doing this, and I believe myself to be in opposition to America, so therefore I am scrambling to find ways to justify Putin's invasion of the Ukraine. Why?
Yeah, people tend to look through a single lens.
Yeah, or finding, Gaddafi was a great leader, and the West just wanted to stop him before he created a unified African currency. Like, nobody could actually know anything about the real history of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya and really come to that conclusion, but it is entertaining to people because it corresponds with beliefs they already want to have.
Yeah.
Gaddafi was in power for 30 to 40 years, but he was just about to do it.
It's easy to want to simplify things, for sure.
And just ignoring any, things that don't fit into your conception of the world or your argument,
Yeah.
Or an inability to deal with the fact that multiple things can all be true at the same time.
And speaking of which, you mentioned the beauty and the ugliness of the world at large. And it's something that I think a lot of people are dealing with in more recent times. Just the world looks grim, the future looks really grim. And that's something I think that I and a lot of listeners will pick out of your music is painting a grim picture of humanity.
But you're never amused?
Oh, certainly.
Never laugh? There's no, okay.
Definitely there's that.
Yes.
But the point is, and I think humans, we are geared to see danger and evil more than we are to see beauty and the good in things, because I imagine because it's a self-preservation kind of mechanism. We're always on the hunt for danger and darkness.
Yeah, but people are also always on the hunt for some sort of redeeming, beautiful story. Everyone wouldn't have spent so much time borrowing Jewish people's religion and remaking it if not.
Yeah, we need it to keep going.
Everybody wants a story of redemption, a story of love and beauty. Cat gifts.
Cat gifts, yeah, for sure. I guess I wanted to ask you, though, for you personally, where do you find hope? How are you able to keep going? Another probably nebulous, large question.
Life can be a lot of fun, full of opportunities.
Just for the listener, underline some of the good things about life.
I don't know. Well, I guess maybe this takes us back to our first question. When you're looking at the person dead in the box, think about what they would do if they were in your place.
Yeah.
Anyone you know who's sick in a hospital right now, what would they do if they were in your place? Man, love, friendship, a fucking great meal, the sun, the possibility of discovering things, people, art. The certainty is that you'll be dead at some point and gone at some point. Everything else is in flux. All other things, at least in theory, are possible. Of course, you have to be open to finding some sort of joy and seeing these things around you. But again, I think that as a result of seeing my father in that aforementioned box has definitely drove home to me that the things that you enjoy, you should try to focus on and relish that enjoyment. It's great to, it's great to, I guess all of it is just kind of self-evident to me, maybe because I am a particular type of person. If you live life and have no joy in anything that's going on around you, then I guess it would be different, right?
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh, I don't have any friends. I don't ever feel happy. I never have quiet moments of reflection or reward. I don't take any pleasure in meeting new people or having new experiences or having old experiences. You could always be fucking dead, man. You could always be dead.
Yeah.
You could always be dead. Instead of being able to go today and say, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, have this conversation that we're having right now, read a book, listen to some music, kiss a girl or a boy or whatever, you could be rotting inside the ground. It's an easy choice. for me personally. For others, I know maybe not so simple, but I can only speak as to my personal experience.
Yeah.
Like, not that obviously life comes full of horrors and terrible moments, but soon enough we'll all get to the next part. Be able to evaluate that when it comes. I'm not in a hurry to get there, since it appears to last for a long time. That whole being dead thing. Yeah, that's my personal take on it.
So do you think that it would be an example of an imbalanced perspective focusing more on the dark than the light to say that your lyrics tend to be more on the grim side, painting pictures of the darkness of reality rather than the beauty?
No, not necessarily.
Yeah, because they feel dark. They feel dark to me. That was kind of what brought up the question. It was like, wow, this guy must have like a real heavy, depressed outlook.
I mean, I
on
do
life.
have heavy thoughts, but they don't. And also, that's why I write them down sometimes. Or that's why I do the music, to get that out.
Yeah. And that leads to another question I have. You mentioned being compelled to write at times. I've heard you talk about how it seems like you're driven to write, and you just said that it's an outlet, a release in some ways, but I wonder what other functions it serves for you personally, and if you could talk about your writing habits, if you ever force yourself to, or if it's just something you're always compelled to do.
Well, now it's also my job, so
Yeah,
but
of course.
no, I've always enjoyed it. I mean, artistic expression. I guess it's kind of hard to explain hows and whys of artistic expression, right?
Yeah, but it feels
I find
great.
it both enjoyable and challenging, and creating is a powerful feeling.
Yeah. Do you find that writing helps you to organize your thoughts or come to conclusions that you hadn't previously had? Are you finding you're discovering things as you write through your writing?
I think, yeah, like making art, it doesn't always come out exactly as you envision it. So there's an area of discovery there. And I think it can be very therapeutic.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's songs that, I might say something like Red Dust or Stone Fruit, where writing and recording it really helped me on a personal level to work through complex emotions.
Yeah. Now, over the years, throughout all your writing, I imagine you've felt yourself develop and grow as a writer.
Sure.
And as a vocalist. How would you say you've grown as a writer and a vocalist?
It didn't change because I had developed my idea of writing when I was a teenager, what I think I was trying to do and what I thought was good.
Yeah.
What changed is my abilities,
Yeah.
So I guess how I describe it is, there are times when, I don't know, if I went back to before I started rapping or whatever, I would write whole books of rhymes, and, some of them in there would be dope, and others would be okay. And some of the stuff would just be like churn. And now it's not like that. Now it's the amount of rhymes I fully throw away is pretty slim. A lot of times I get started and I already know that this is not the one, and I'll just leave it. And maybe later I'll go back and say, oh, that one phrase, I got halfway through a verse and then I was like, this isn't doing anything for anybody. But that one phrase right there, I'll take that and expand on it, or find some other way to take that idea and move it forward. So a greater ability to self-edit, being better in general, my voice is fully established. So a lot of times, then you can turn your attention to trying to do more difficult things without just making sure that you know how you're writing. And the ability to, I think part of that is how I work. You know, I changed my methodology. I try to challenge myself. So there are things that I did, you know, I might do a record and be like, all right, we're not gonna say anything about, like, remove crutches from yourself, and then move forward. You know, okay, this record not really gonna say anything about weed. Really, keep that to a minimum or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm gonna try and develop these through lines that connect all of these things. And that's why sometimes things are for me. So like in the song Harlem, for example, there's some elements in there that are kind of drawing on the idea of, and this is like on a 10th level, nothing that anybody else seems to care about. But there's ideas in there drawing from like Space Odyssey 2001, one of my favorite movies.
uh-huh.
It's like the line, it's full of stars.
Yeah.
And then when I say our mortarless fortresses lie abandoned, alien monoliths still standing, on the main surface, I'm talking about how, like Great Zimbabwe, for example, this abandoned wonder of ancient African craftsmanship, of this city just built from stones without any mortar and its history or whatever.
What's it called, the city?
Great Zimbabwe.
Okay.
And then you have something like the alien monoliths I'm talking about are like Western colonial creations, some giant hotel or bridges, other things that were built. I'm striking that comparison. But then part of it is me in my head being like, on some Space Odyssey 2001, like little thread that I ran through the first part of the song. Doesn't need to matter to anyone, you know, but something I'm doing for myself while I'm writing it and seeing, oh, could you do, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't think of it when I was necessarily starting, but then you're like, okay, I'm putting that in there. So it, you know, I have the ability now to be like, all right, I know I can attack the first level. Can I do all of these other things at the same time? Can I play these other games with language and ideas?
That's great. Can I mention a couple like superficial things I've noticed?
Sure.
It seemed like in the past, your lyrics were in the first person more, as opposed to more recent stuff where it's maybe speaking to more universal than personal ideas. Yourself removed from it a little bit more.
I could buy that.
And also maybe as far as delivery goes, it seemed like maybe more yelling in the past, whereas there's maybe more range in quiet to loudness in more recent years.
I think that sometimes can come just with getting better, you know, not yelling as much. But I think it's everything is, I kind of try to tailor to the project. So something like this last record where I really thought of it as like individual pieces and short stories that are around a particular subject, but approaching it in different ways and not necessarily having to connect. Like something like terror management, I feel like there's an attempt both sonically and lyrically to weave a line through these different themes that is narrative, where the record really, I hope, in listening to it front to back, reflects a journey I'm trying to send you on. Whereas on this record, it's like you could really listen to these songs in whatever order you felt like to some extent.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I have them in a good order, and I think it works how it is, but it's not. It's like if you had a book of short stories and you said, I'm going to read the fourth one first, you'd be fine. So project to project, I think there's some change there, but I could entertain the idea that there's less of me and I now, or at least in the more recent projects.
Yeah. Speaking of the new album, Aethiopes, this is a question that I really hesitate to ask because I know it seems like other interviewers would ask you, but I really want to know what is the actual theme or themes of the new album, and why did you call it Aethiopes?
I think the themes surround ideas of Africa as both a reality and an invention, and otherness and identity. I guess that's the central theme, and then the other themes spin out of that central idea of like Africa. What is it? What does it mean to different people? How did it come to be a thing?
Cannibal tours, they came on all fours. Waterborne eyes like jaws. Bones litter the beach north. Crack meat right out the beast claws. Drums in the hills like sunset. The gun turret swing right to left. African queen on the ship's deck. Shipwrecked European swimming with the virus. Shot out like God's semen. Fuck the world, Pac screaming. Crack missions for.
And it was funny the other day. I saw somebody on the internet. On my brief forays, saw somebody posting, "You can't be a white African," and I thought about how, again, it's a canvas upon which people can project whatever they want. Because are we then saying that Africa is its original designation by the Greeks of Ethiopia, the land of the blacks? To me, it's an interesting either assertion or regression philosophically.
Yeah.
Because that's literally what Ethiopia meant, the land of the dark people.
Yeah, it's another thing that you can look at through various lenses.
And so this person, in their mind, no doubt is saying something anti-colonialist and revolutionary that at the same time I would argue is pedantic and regressive. Unless then we have to bend our understanding so that, and again, that's what happens, is you're forced to bend your understanding of reality to reflect the ideas that you want to project, which is what Europeans did to begin with. Because it's like, oh, well, Africa is the land of the blacks, but obviously not everyone in Africa continent, not everybody on the continent has the same skin color or features, or then you have to be like sub-Saharan Africa. And even then you're getting into problems because the Bantu people came to take over the entirety of sub-Saharan African, but there are people indigenous to other parts of Africa who were not Bantu people.
Yeah.
And even the idea of black is in and of itself a nebulous term that people can make fit into whatever they want, which is obviously what people want to do anyway.
Sure. It's one of the problems of labeling is it's always imperfect.
No true Scotsman.
What's that mean?
Oh, just basically where, I say, oh man, any real American believes in the Second Amendment. And then I'm like, hey, here, I produced this document where Benjamin Franklin said that X, Y, and Z. Oh, well, then obviously he's not a true American.
Right.
In order to justify itself, then it becomes like anyone who doesn't hold this view then is not a true American. And so your argument can't really be disproven.
Yeah. Back to your writing, do you have any current challenges or goals you're going towards? What are your current writing goals, basically?
My current writing goal is, once we get off this phone call, finish editing this chapter and turn it in. That's my current writing goal. Other than that, I've got other music to work on. I've already started, and we'll see where it goes. I mean, I have some ideas of what I want to do with that album, but it'd be pretty premature to announce my goals with the record that's just getting started.
Yeah. So
and yeah, there's a lot going on this year before I even get into that. We have a bunch of projects coming from a variety of people, and I might even slip something of my own in there at some point.
So you've expanded from music to books. You ever see yourself maybe trying to write a screenplay or any other forms of writing?
Let me do this first.
Yeah.
But sure. Yeah, I mean, when I'm like, man, I really need to get this done, it seems a bit brazen to start talking about screenplays I'm going to write. I think I have the ability to, but you have to actually do it. You don't win the Super Bowl on paper.
Can you compare the feeling of finishing a song to finishing a book? Like, is one more satisfying than the other? Or do you feel like you're more suited towards one than the other?
Would have to finish the book in order to answer that question.
All right.
But when and if I finish this book, I will definitely let you know. I'm sure the feelings will be similar but different. It's a longer process.
All right. I really appreciate you spending all this time with me.
Well, I appreciate the time. Definitely very insightful questions.
Cool. Thanks again, man. This was awesome.
No problem. Thank you for taking the time.
In this month's bonus episode, I talked to Billy Woods for an additional 20 minutes. We get into some of the details of his album Hiding Places. We discuss history repeating itself, reading habits, weed habits, the value of literacy, and more. That is at patreon.com/weirdrap. For just $3, you get that and all our past bonus content. That includes exclusive interviews with Anti-Pop Consortium, New Kingdom, Mike Ladd, Dose One, and many more. I don't know if I've mentioned the Crate 808 podcast on here in the past, but it's a great show. I think the Brits, the English, are pretty good at speaking English. Compared to Americans, they're just more articulate. If you're going to listen to people talk about rap music, I suggest listen to the Brits because they're just better at talking. And Crate 808 is a British rap podcast. Oddly, they don't focus on British rap music. It's almost all US rap, especially the sort of vein birthed from the mid-90s. But they cover all sorts of recent releases and artists, and they included me and the rest of the Weird Rap discussion gang on a series that they have begun publishing. I think so far they've released a J Dilla and a Hieroglyphics episode. So check out the Crate 808 podcast. I always ask people to rate and review this podcast, and people hardly ever do it. But my latest attempt to get people to do it is that I'm going to review some of these reviews. From a year ago, Chems187 says, "This is a side of hip-hop that needs more exposure. Appreciate the effort to do so with this podcast. The APC episode was informative, but I'm a huge fan of those guys." Anti-Pop Consortium. "One piece of constructive criticism for the host, lose the monotone delivery. You're obviously passionate about the music, but you don't sound like you are." And I appreciate that criticism. I did take it to heart, and after that episode, which was episode 2, I think, I started to rely much less on reading my questions and commentary. Now it's more just off the top of my head, and hopefully that gives more life to my delivery. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Am I better at speaking now? The most recent one is from Robert Van Vrenken, but it's 5 months old now. I'm not going to complain. I appreciate the review. Robert says, "Weird Rap is one of the best hip-hop podcasts out there, particularly for the left-of-center listener. The host, Jonah, that's me, an accomplished artist himself, is not only an excellent orator, but also extremely passionate about the art form. I don't know that I'd say I'm an excellent orator, but I'm trying. His artist interviews go in depth and uncover revelations for even the most knowledgeable superfan. One thing that stands out about the show is its inclusiveness as well as its outspoken nature with regard to the misogyny and homophobia that often go unchecked elsewhere." I'm glad that comes across because I I do. I'll say it again. I don't like misogyny or homophobia, and it's sad when it's reflected in rap music. Give me a rating, give me a review. That would be very nice. It would be much appreciated. And I've made it very easy to do that. Whatever platform, whatever accounts you hold, you can quickly and freely help us out by going to weirdrap.com/rating. All right, until next time, even though it seems like we're on the precipice of disaster, the future looks grim, be like Billy Woods and remember to appreciate the beauty of life. It is wonderful as it is woeful and as it is weird. So go and sow your wild, weird oats while you still can.